Uh, this next episode begins to get into the issue of king. Not actually, but it sort of gets it going, gets it started. I started. I left off the last episode when I left IIT because of the mistake of the financial aid's office, and took an apartment in Chicago. So when I started living here at that apartment, um, I had two calculators. They were Hewlett-Packard HP 32S calculators. I had bought one of them. The other one I did not buy. The other one I obtained by an act of God. And it was through someone else's misfortune. And let me tell you the story. I had bought one because it had random numbers, and I was interested in random processes. I had a specific program I wanted to write. So I bought one, and it was tremendous. I was really excited about it. And I thought to myself at one point, I was a student at IT, I thought it would be nice to have another one because I can't get all the programs. I have more programs than one calculator can hold in its memory. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have another? I didn't have enough money to get on one, so I just sat on the idea. So one day I was at the student center and it began to rain very hard. And when I left the student center, it was raining cats and dogs, and I noticed these two guys had left just before me. And when they got into the rain, they started to run, and something fell out of one of the guy's pockets, and I noticed that they kept running. He didn't notice. He didn't know that he had dropped it. He didn't notice it. I noticed it. So they kept running, and they went away. They disappeared. And I looked, and I saw, well, here was, in its case, it was protected from the water. It was a HP 32S calculator. So it was just exactly what I wanted, and it came to me by an act of God, and I had to decide. There was a label. I looked at it. It had a label with his name and information on it. So I could have contacted him, but I didn't. I said to myself, for one thing, I don't have to. It's not finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Possession is 9/10 of the law. It's now mine. It's in my hands, and I'm not obligated to return it. The other thing was that I didn't pray about getting one, but I definitely had this thought in my head that wouldn't it be nice for one to come to me somehow, and it did. So I thought, well, fate is telling me something. I didn't think necessarily that was true, but. And I was sufficiently hardened to life at that point that I was willing to set down my scruples and keep it. So I just took the label off and I kept it. And when I was in this apartment, it was at 480, let's see, what was the address? It was on Gunnison, 26 something, Gunnison, I think. The one block west of Western, I think it was, and one block north of Lawrence. It's on that corner. On the third floor, it was a third floor apartment, and it was a one bedroom apartment, and I was there by myself. And I wrote some programs for the calculator, and I used them in the apartment. And I sell one of the programs that I wrote on my website, jamesbatek.com. And I think it's a good program. And you don't need a computer to do shuffle. A computer will enable you to do shuffle. There are a lot of sites on the web that can do that for you. And there's probably a lot of software available, but you have to spend $1,000 or $500, something like that, for a computer if you want to do that. My program will do it with a $50 calculator. So it's and plus it's small. You can take it places that you can't take a personal computer, even on a laptop. My current version for the later model of that calculator, which is a HP 33S, can shuffle up to 175 items, which is quite a lot. There's a lot you can do with that. And as I said, I sell that on the site, so you can get that for a small cash outlay. I wrote another program that organizes. It takes a set of items that you step through one at a time, and it stops at a random point in that set. And you don't know which one it's going to stop at until you get there. So you test each one. You test to see if you get the next one. And each time you get another one, you're given an option to descend to another level and do the same thing beginning. So it's orders. Say you have 5 items that you want to step through. You step through and you get the first one. You're asked how many items you want in the next order below that for that number one item. So this raceinates throughout orders, so you can get up to 11 different orders. You can do it on that program. That program is not for sale. It's a little bit too complicated. I probably haven't explained it sufficiently here, but it's a good program. I use it a lot. And also I made wrote a program to uniformly describe time. That is, I turn the days, actually years, months, days, hours, minutes, and seconds into one variable for time, so that I can make a certain increment, size of increment, number of seconds, if you will, plus fractions of seconds as the increment. So I can have up to a couple, maybe almost a month. What I'm currently using for is about 2 days. It's a special interval time that I use, and each interval each interval goes from one split second to another split second, and I make the program runs through each interval and tells you how many days and so forth, how many seconds, how many hours, and therefore I have one number to describe time. I don't have a day, 30 or whatever, an hour or whatever. It's just one number. It's all uniform variable. And it's a very useful program for planning. And I wrote that while I was staying in that apartment. I did other things with random numbers. With the shuffle program, I shuffled my food. I had a shelf and I had numbers on it, and I had potatoes, each potato in a number. And then I used the program to change the positions of the potatoes so that if there was anything in the environment that was interested in where those potatoes were, it was confused, because they all had a random new position in the sequence of potatoes. And it was fun. I find the use of that program to be very entertaining. It's an interesting program to use. I did things like randomize the positions of my window shades. I put a scale of inches on the side, and then I chose a random number. So every day I had the window shades pulled down a random distance between the top and the bottom. And I eventually ran out of money. I moved to a second apartment in the same building because it was cheaper and it was efficiency. And for 6 months, I went without money for food the second half of the month. I had enough money to pay for rent plus 1/2 of a month of food. And after 6 months, I tired of it and decided to go homeless. So I left everything in the apartment and I walked out the door. I spent a couple of days in the homeless shelter, Pacific Garden Mission. I think they folded since then, but that's where I spent a few days. But I kept trying to get out of there. I wanted to leave the city because I felt that it was a trap, so I started walking. And I walked and I walked. I walked all night. And as I was walking through one part of town, I stopped. It was almost dawn. The sun was about ready to come up. I had been walking all night. I looked across the street, and I noticed a fire coming out of the building. not a fire that you might call incendiary fire, more akin to an electrical fire. And in fact, it was such a fire, interesting fire, uh, because it reminded me of all the stories that I've heard about Moses and his burning bush. The fire that did not consume. That fire moved on that bush and didn't consume it. And this fire moved on the building. It appeared from outside, out of the building, just emerged straight away from the building. And it was moving around, it was dancing around, it was moving, playing around. It looked like it was interested in what it was experiencing. It almost had a consciousness, and it wasn't consuming the building. It was a fire that did not consume. It danced around a window, and then it disappeared back into the building. It was in evidence for maybe about 3 to 5 seconds, not too long, but it was unmistakable. I'm not making it up. It happened, and I after that just turned and continued walking. So I continued walking, and I met up with some police. They came by in their car. I was sitting there. It was past dawn. The light was out, and I went to the police car and I talked to these officers, and they were sort of curious what I was doing, and I said I gave them my name, and I said, this is who I am. I have family in these parts. So I named my brothers and sisters, and I said, I'm interested in joining the mafia. I would like to help out race relations. I like to mend the fence between blacks and whites. And they didn't comment. They just drove away. Then a little bit later, I was walking, kept walking. I was sort of out of the city limits. It was obviously more like a rural area almost. There was a lot of grass, and it was an open area. And I sort of reached the end of what I was able to do as far as walking. So I collapsed by the side of the road and reached up. There was a clump of earth. I turned it over. I thought, well, this is going to be my burial marker. I've reached as far as I can go. This is it. And police came by, and an emergency vehicle, and police. There were two low-ranking officers who were playing around with me a lot. They were very antagonistic, but there was a sergeant there. I think he was a sergeant, and he asked me where I was from. I said I was from Chicago. And he said, "When did you ever leave Chicago?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where did you go?" I said, "Connecticut." And he looked at me very interestedly. Whether he knew something I didn't know that was significant about my going to Connecticut, I don't know. But they got me to a hospital. And at the hospital, it was not a mental hospital, it was a normal hospital. They gave me 3 steaks, juicy, luscious steaks, and I proceeded to do what I could to keep myself from being classified as insignificant. So I walked up to the desk and I said to them, this is a European expedition. Now, I had heard or read of at one point an expedition where they were going somewhere in some far-off corner of the earth. It was a European group. They came to a mountain pass with their cars, and it was impassable. And they got past the barrier by taking their automobiles apart and transporting every piece past the barrier on foot, then reassembling the cars on the other side. Now, obviously, they didn't have any way of predicting that they would come to this, so they must have had a tremendous amount of ability posited in every member of that group to go on to such a hazardous venture. and to negotiate a problem like that in such an amazing way. I was just really impressed when I read that or heard about it. And I held myself to a similar standard, and I said that to I said at the desk, this is a European expedition, and as far as I was concerned, it was an expedition of one person. They might have assumed that if it was true that I might have been somehow separated from the group and I was just by myself. But at the very least, it was an expedition of one. And I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew that I was onto something. I had just seen something that I didn't know what to think of, but it was definitely something that raised the stakes quite a bit in my life, seeing that fire, the fire that does not consume. And so I went back to my bed and in the hospital, and I lay down. And then I found out that they were shipping me out to a mental hospital. I had been there before. I knew it was pretty much what it was like. I didn't want to go there. I didn't like mental hospitals. I don't like mental hospitals. Who would? And so as they were taking me out, they put me in one location for a while. And I was lying there on the stretcher, and I didn't like the fact that they were taking me to a mental hospital. So I decided to have wreak a little havoc. So I had been thinking about things as a homeless person. One of the things that I had been thinking about was the fact that hospitals probably have, in many cases, on their foundations, explosive charges, because if a hostile enemy came into power into a certain area and took over a hospital, you wouldn't necessarily want the hospital's resources to accrue to the enemy forces. So you would blow up the hospital. The foundations would be the most efficient way of doing that. So I thought, well, maybe this hospital has explosives on its foundation, maybe it doesn't. But they probably have to think about it, and that might not be such a big stretch to think about it. So I said out loud for anyone to hear me. I said, I made up this. I said, I hereby initiate by verbal command countdown by virtue of my Habsburg family ancestry, which was fictitious, or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know if I'm a Habsburg or not, but I figured I might be, and even if I weren't, at least this is part of my ploy to pretend that I am. So I'm saying I'm a Habsburg, and because of that, I have the right to a verbal countdown to blowing up the foundation. So I said, I'm now starting the countdown, verbal countdown to the detonation of the explosive charges that are located on the foundation of this hospital. I started the countdown. So I started something like 10 or 15. I counted down, got to 0, and nothing happened. Until a couple seconds later, some woman, staff member, probably an orderly or something like that, maybe a nurse, I don't think so, but she walked through the room, and her face was white, and she was really frightened. So I think the message got through. And I heard a woman doctor, say to a man doctor out. I couldn't see them; they were out somewhere else. But I overheard their conversation. She said to him, "I heard him say it," and she was very insistent. She was trying to make a point. I didn't know what he had said to her, but she might have been making some comment. The fact that she had heard me say either about the expedition or about the explosive charge, and I think it really got them to going. And that was the end of that particular passage of the story. But they took me to the mental hospital, Madden Mental Hospital, and the first or second day there was a man who came in as a patient, and he was very interesting. He talked his way through a session we had with a psychiatrist, a group session, and he kept talking right through. He did his thing. He talked about something very sensible. He was not psychotic. talking about some very interesting stuff, and right in front of the psychiatrist, he completely ignored the psychiatrist, and a very interesting guy. So I was sitting there later at a table doing some logistics, some of my drawings, and he came by and he looked down and he said, "Don't do that in here." But I reached under his hands and finished the drawing. And at that moment, he smiled at me and he said, "Just put on 20 pounds, you'll be first." Now, this guy was Italian. He was powerful. He had a great presence, tremendous presence, and he walked around that place like a king. So I didn't question anything he said. I took him at face value. So he said, "Just ask for a special diet and ask for a special diet." He said. So I asked for the special diet later. They refused to give it to me. So I said I took it upon myself to put on 20 pounds. I started eating more, asked for other patients' food if they didn't want it, and I put on 20 pounds. And this was what I call an appointment as first. He said, "Just put on 20 pounds, you'll be first." Now, first what? First in the local pecking order? First in the whole world? First in Chicago? Maybe first of all this. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, and I can only, my own thinking is probably, at that point, was probably not too important. The important thing was what I had done, and I think that my little escapade in the other hospital, the regular hospital with the explosive alert, got back to him. In recent memory, I'm thinking of the TV show Alias, where I saw there was one early episode, and they had an incident where this what was it called? I forget the code they used, but there was an organization, a secret organization, its headquarters, and when something went wrong, the leader flipped the button on his computer or something, and it started a countdown for explosive charges on the foundation of that structure to blow. And they averted that, but that was the emergency at the moment. So this is something that other people are aware of, and it's not totally fallacious. So also in another recent TV show that relates to this, I'm thinking of Grey's Anatomy, where they had what they called a code black, which is in a hospital where there's a live explosive. And there is a code for suspicion of a charge that may go off in a hospital. So I think what happened was, when I raised the alarm on that hospital, that they gave a code black. And because they did, various people were alerted, probably the police, and through their connections with the police, the Italian mafia. This guy was Italian. And I think the reason that I'm eligible for that is that I have Roman blood, which I found out from being an artist model. When I was poor and homeless in the East, I did a lot of artist modeling work because it was easy to do and paid pretty well. One of the teachers of one of the classes that I modeled for told the class that this model, which was me, is of Roman stock, because he looked at my physiognomy, my face, and he decided that he determined that I have Roman blood going back to ancient Rome, the Roman Empire. I have no substantiation of that in terms of family tree or any hereditary investigation research, but that's what he said. So evidently you don't have to be Italian to be brought into the mafia. You can be Roman, because it's the same idea that part of the world is where that organization is founded, and they feed into that organization genetically, because those are the people that care the most about that part of the world. So that occurred in the hospital, and after that point, things began to happen, and it has been apparent that there has been an entry in those records. There probably aren't many records. I don't know much about it. I don't have to. I'm pretty much free from the need to administrate. I do what I please, and this is the nature of what leads to one becoming king, and that's what happened to me. So that's the end of this episode.